The moment I understood that good intentions could still open doors to devastation came on a quiet morning that felt no different from 100 others before it. The kind of morning where the light filtered through the blinds in pale stripes across the kitchen counter and the hum of the refrigerator was the loudest sound in the house. And yet everything that followed would fracture the life I thought I knew beyond repair. I had convinced myself that surprises were still allowed in long marriages, that spontaneity could still breathe life into routines hardened by years of responsibility, and that love, when handled carefully, could still be playful instead of practical. I was in my late 40s then, though the exact number hardly mattered anymore because I already felt older than my reflection suggested, worn down not by age but by the slow grind of work schedules, school runs, unpaid overtime, and a home that demanded more than it gave back. My wife had been gone for several days on a corporate assignment in a coastal city far from our quiet neighborhood, and while she still had nearly another week before she was due back, the emptiness in the house felt heavier than usual, as if something invisible had taken up residence in the space she left behind. Our children were seated at the breakfast table, one scrolling endlessly through a cracked phone screen with the disinterest only a teenager could master, the other nudging cereal around her bowl as if it were a puzzle instead of food, and I sat between them pretending that another mug of coffee could substitute for rest, peace, or clarity. That was when the idea struck me, not as a gentle suggestion but as a sudden, electrifying certainty, that we should go see her, not next month or next year, but immediately, as if distance itself were a challenge I could simply refuse to accept. And for a brief moment the plan felt like proof that love could still be impulsive, still daring, still brave enough to chase its own happiness without hesitation. I spoke the thought aloud without realizing how loudly my heart was pounding, telling them we could board a plane the next evening, that we could walk up to her hotel door, and watch her face light up with the kind of joy that only surprises can create. And their reactions filled me with a rush of purpose I had not felt in years, because the younger one gasped as though I had promised her the moon, while the older one paused his scrolling just long enough to nod with rare approval. Within hours, I had rearranged my work schedule, negotiated absences with the school, and booked tickets with shaking hands, convincing myself that this was proof of devotion rather than desperation, and every step of the process replayed in my mind as an imagined scene of reunion, where tears would fall, laughter would echo, and all the quiet doubts that had crept into our marriage over the years would be erased by one perfect moment. I tried to call her, once, twice, then several more times, each unanswered attempt dismissed as bad timing, packed schedules, or unreliable signals, because when you want to believe in something, you will find endless reasons to protect that belief from reality. I sent messages filled with affection and casual updates, all of them delivered, none of them answered, and while a small unease began to curl in my stomach, I told myself it was only anticipation masquerading as anxiety, the same nervous energy you feel before a big event, never imagining that my own instincts were warning me of a truth I was not yet ready to face. The flight itself blurred together in a haze of restless movement and forced smiles, with one child lost in music and the other lost in excited chatter, while I stared through the small oval window at clouds that looked deceptively soft, wondering when exactly my confidence had begun to feel like a costume rather than a natural state of being. Every few minutes I glanced at my phone, refreshing the screen as if persistence alone could summon a reply, and when none came, I invented excuses for her silence, imagining her in crowded conference halls, in back-to-back meetings, in conversations too important to interrupt, because the alternative was unthinkable. By the time we landed, night had already wrapped the city in neon reflections and restless traffic, and the drive to the hotel felt endless, each red light tightening the invisible knot in my chest, as though the closer we came, the more fragile my hope became. The children complained about hunger and boredom, and I promised them dinner after we saw their mother, clinging to the idea that she would join us, that the night would unfold as planned, and that I would soon laugh at my earlier worries. The hotel lobby was elegant and impersonal, polished floors reflecting warm lights that made everything feel staged, almost unreal, and I left the children seated on a plush couch while I approached the front desk, rehearsing my cheerful request as if it were a line in a play, unaware that I was stepping onto a stage where my life would be rewritten without my consent. The receptionist typed her response into a glowing screen, confirming that my wife was indeed registered, and my relief was immediate and overwhelming, as if the simple acknowledgement of her presence validated everything I had felt and planned, until the small details began to unravel that reassurance thread by thread. When she attempted to reach the room and received no answer, then mentioned that the reservation listed 2 occupants, the words struck me with such force that, for a second I wondered if I had misheard, if the air itself had distorted the sound to protect me, but her hesitant expression left no room for misunderstanding. I laughed reflexively, the hollow kind of laugh you use to shield yourself from questions you cannot yet afford to ask, and told myself there was a logical explanation, that corporate travel sometimes involved cost-saving measures, that perhaps a colleague was sharing the space. Yet even as I spoke the rationalizations, I knew they rang false, because my wife's company prided itself on independence and professionalism. I collected the room keys and returned to my children, forcing a calm I no longer felt, and guided them toward the elevator with the careful composure of someone trying not to drop a fragile object, while my thoughts spiraled through possibilities I did not want to name. Their excitement filled the narrow elevator with energy. But for me, every floor we passed felt like a countdown, each number drawing me closer to a truth that pulsed behind my eyes like a warning light I refused to see. I left them in our room under the pretense of settling in, then walked alone down the carpeted hallway toward the door that now felt like a border between 2 versions of my life, one built on trust and routine, the other on secrecy and betrayal, and when I knocked, the muffled sounds from within sent a chill through my veins. I texted that I was outside, watched the typing indicator appear and vanish, and when the door finally opened, I was met not with surprise or joy, but with a look that shifted quickly from shock to irritation, as though I had interrupted something inconvenient rather than something sacred. She stood there in unfamiliar clothing, blocking the doorway, speaking my name as if it were a mistake, and for a moment I could not remember how to breathe, because the image before me did not match the woman I thought I knew. A man's voice drifted from inside, casual and unashamed, and when he stepped into view, adjusting his shirt, the reality I had been avoiding slammed into me with merciless clarity. The world narrowed to that hallway, to the echo of my own heartbeat, to the sudden understanding that love can collapse not with a dramatic explosion, but with a quiet, devastating certainty that changes everything in a single instant. The confrontation unfolded in fragments I will never fully forget, words spilling out in a mixture of disbelief and anger, her excuses shifting from denial to justification, the stranger explaining that he had been led to believe she was unattached. And in that moment, I realized that betrayal is not only about the act itself, but about the stories we tell to make it possible. He left quickly, disappearing down the hallway as though he were escaping a burning building, while she stood before me, trying to contain the disaster she had unleashed, insisting it was a mistake, a lapse in judgment, a moment that did not define her. Yet every syllable felt like a stone added to the weight already crushing my chest. I asked questions I did not want answered, and she avoided my eyes in a way that told me everything I needed to know, because truth does not always arrive as a confession, but often as a silence that refuses to be filled. I walked back to my children carrying a burden I could not share, rehearsing a mask of normalcy I knew would not hold for long, and when they asked where their mother was, I told them she would join us soon, though the words felt foreign on my tongue, because I had already lost faith in the future I was pretending still existed. The night that followed blurred into a performance of family togetherness, with forced smiles, shared meals, and conversations that skimmed the surface of joy while concealing an ocean of pain beneath. And when she finally arrived, composed and polished, the contrast between who she appeared to be and who I now knew she was left me feeling as though I were living inside a carefully constructed illusion. Our youngest clung to her with innocent devotion. Our oldest watched with guarded eyes, sensing the tension that lingered in every pause, and I realized then that children feel fractures long before they can name them. She claimed she had another obligation that evening, a professional commitment that could not be postponed, and while part of me wanted to expose the truth immediately, I held back for the sake of the small faces watching me, because once innocence is lost, it can never be restored. We walked through the city afterward, lights reflecting on water, laughter mingling with street noise, and beneath the beauty of the moment, I felt my life rearranging itself into something unrecognizable, as if the future were quietly closing one door while opening another I was not yet ready to enter. Later, when the children slept and the silence of the room pressed in around me, I confronted her again, demanding honesty without filters or excuses, and piece by piece, the story unraveled, revealing months of secrecy, flirtation, and choices that could not be undone. And I understood then that betrayal is rarely a single act, but a series of decisions made long before the truth comes to light. She spoke of feeling unseen, of longing for validation, of drifting away without realizing how far she had gone. And though I listened, I could not accept blame for a wound I did not create, because love, even when imperfect, does not justify deception. I told her we would leave in the morning, that the children deserved stability more than explanations, and as I lay awake in the dark, staring at a ceiling that felt impossibly distant, I wondered how something so carefully built could unravel so quickly, and whether I would ever recognize myself again after everything that had been taken from me. The journey home was quiet, heavy with unspoken questions and unresolved emotions, and when the children slept, I stared ahead, imagining the conversations that awaited us, the changes that would reshape our days, and the strength I would need to face them with honesty and compassion. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, filled with moments of doubt, grief, and healing, but I also sensed, for the first time since that fateful morning, that something new could emerge from the wreckage, something rooted not in illusion, but in truth. And as the world outside the window shifted from night to dawn, I promised myself that no matter what awaited us, I would move forward, one step at a time, carrying the lessons of loss and the quiet hope of rebuilding a life defined not by betrayal, but by resilience. Before I could fully grasp what rebuilding meant, the days that followed blurred into a strange rhythm of normalcy layered over quiet devastation, where routine tasks like making breakfast or driving to school felt heavier than they ever had before, as if each movement carried the weight of a future that no longer resembled the one I had carefully planned for decades. The house felt emptier, not only because she was gone, but because the idea of us had left with her, leaving behind an echo that lingered in every room, in the silence that followed laughter, in the empty side of the bed that seemed colder no matter how warm the blankets were. Friends and coworkers noticed the change in me before I found the courage to explain it, and when I finally did, their sympathy was both comforting and suffocating, because I did not want pity, I wanted clarity, a sense of direction that would tell me how to walk forward without constantly looking back. At night, when the children slept, I replayed the events in my mind, not because I hoped to change them, but because I was searching for understanding, trying to locate the moment where things had shifted, the first crack in a foundation I had believed was unbreakable, and I realized that sometimes love does not fail all at once, but rather fades quietly, leaving behind only the memory of what once felt certain. Telling the youngest was the hardest part, because innocence does not understand betrayal. It only recognizes absence, and when I finally sat beside her on the couch, explaining that her mother would be living somewhere else for a while, her confusion pierced me deeper than any argument ever could. She asked if it was her fault, if she had done something wrong, if love could disappear as easily as a person walking out the door, and I held her close, promising that nothing she had done could ever cause this, that love was complicated but not fragile, and that sometimes adults make choices that children cannot change. The older one listened from a distance, pretending to be absorbed in his phone, yet I could feel his presence like a quiet anchor, his understanding both a comfort and a reminder of how quickly childhood can slip away when reality forces it to. That night after they were asleep, I allowed myself to grieve openly, tears soaking into a pillow as I mourned not only the loss of my marriage, but the version of myself who believed it would last forever, because hope, once broken, never returns in the same form. As weeks turned into months, the legal details unfolded like a slow-moving storm, paperwork piling up on the kitchen table, conversations with lawyers replacing the casual talks we once had about weekend plans, and the finality of signatures sealing a chapter I had never imagined closing. Each document felt like a farewell, not just to her, but to the life we had built together, and though part of me longed to hold on, another part understood that clinging to something already lost would only deepen the pain. I watched her pack the last of her belongings, her movements careful and distant, and in that moment, I realized that sometimes endings do not arrive with dramatic speeches or explosive arguments, but with quiet goodbyes and unspoken regrets that linger long after the door has closed. Raising the children alone became both a challenge and a gift, forcing me to confront my own limitations while discovering a strength I never knew I possessed, as every school event, late-night conversation, and shared meal reminded me that family is not defined by perfection, but by presence. There were nights when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me, when I doubted my ability to guide them through a world that had already proven unpredictable. Yet each small victory, each moment of laughter, each shared secret, reaffirmed my commitment to create a home filled with honesty and resilience. I learned to listen more, to speak less, to allow space for their emotions without trying to fix everything, because healing is not a destination, but a journey that unfolds at its own pace, shaped by patience and understanding. Over time, the anger softened into reflection, and the bitterness gave way to acceptance, as I recognized that holding onto resentment only prolonged the pain, while forgiveness, though difficult, offered a path toward peace. I did not excuse what had happened, nor did I forget it, but I chose to release the weight it carried, understanding that my future deserved freedom from the past. Each sunrise felt like a quiet promise, a reminder that life continues even after heartbreak, and with every passing day, I found myself breathing a little easier, trusting that growth often emerges from the most unexpected places. The children began to adapt, finding new rhythms in our changed lives, discovering that joy could exist alongside sorrow, and that love could expand rather than diminish when tested. We created new traditions, simple rituals that reminded us of our bond, and in those moments I felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that while our family had changed, it had not disappeared but evolved into something stronger, shaped by resilience and honesty. Looking back, I no longer see that journey as a tragedy alone, but as a turning point that revealed the depth of my own strength and the enduring power of love, not as a promise of permanence, but as a commitment to growth and compassion. Though the scars remain, they no longer define me, serving instead as reminders of survival, of the courage to face reality, and of the hope that continues to guide me forward. Today, when I reflect on everything that happened, I understand that life is not measured by what we lose, but by what we choose to rebuild. And while the path ahead remains uncertain, I walk it with gratitude for the lessons learned, the love that endures, and the quiet assurance that even after the darkest nights, dawn will always return.